We're back into looking at the book of Acts, the first few chapters. We've had a couple weeks off from doing that with different things going on, but we're going to continue this week and next week, and we'll finish looking at the first 5 chapters, how God started the church. It's our history. Maybe it's not our particular congregation, but it's our ancestors, those that have faithfully passed on the message of the faith that's reached us 2,000 years later where we're at. And these sermons kind of build on each other because we look at characteristics of the early church. And we see that Jesus gave his disciples a challenge to go into the world and share the gospel. And he said, I'm going to give you the power to do it with the Holy Spirit equipping you. And then the message goes forth, the message of salvation, the gospel message that we believe in, that Jesus Christ died and rose from the grave and gives us life in him. And the response, the fact that God changes our lives and allows us to be able to be indwelled by him and to live for him. And as a result of those things, we saw in the book of Acts that souls were saved. But then we saw that time went on and there was opposition to the gospel message, opposition to those that were sharing it. But they were bold. And when they were bold, even more people were saved. And then we saw, what we will see today, is that those people came together in unity and showed great generosity. And as a result, even more people were saved. So we're just seeing more characteristics that's going to result in more people coming to the Lord. And if we're looking to be a church that's growing and more people coming to Christ, these characteristics, the more and more that they are true of us right here, the more we're going to see happen what happened back there at the early church. And so these points are given to us to challenge us to step up a little bit and to see how we can be more in line with who God has called the church to be. As I've shared before, 80% of churches in our country are dying out. There's less and less people going to church, and many churches are shrinking in numbers as a result. And only about 20% are growing. And of those 20% that are growing, 19% of those 20 are growing either because they're having lots of babies or people are coming there from other churches. Because a lot of those dying churches, people are like, well, this church is losing it, so we're going to go jump on a different ship. And so they come to those churches. There's nothing wrong with having babies or people coming from other churches, but only 1% of churches in our country are growing because they're reaching lost people that are coming into their congregations. And that's my prayer every day, that we would be one of those churches that are reaching lost people and bringing them in. It's great if we have babies born. It's great if other people come from other places, but we want to see people, their lives transformed by Jesus Christ, being out there and coming in there. And that's my prayer for our church, and I think we're going to see that happen more and more in the years ahead. What we're looking at today is unity and generosity. And we've put in the bulletin the last few weeks, and a few weeks ago, Angie Little got up and shared her testimony of how God's worked in her life. And next Saturday up in Tuscola, there's going to be this Relay for Life kind of going on all day. We can get all the details later, but it's a chance to be able to raise awareness and to raise money for cancer research. Because it's a very real issue that we have, and there are people doing something about it. And for those of us whose lives have been touched by cancer over the years, we can always see how the advancements in medicine have improved with each generation of people dealing with that disease. And we're a church, and we're all about saving souls, but we're also interested in other issues that people have as well, including health issues. And looking at our prayer list, people that we know dealing with cancer is one of those things that touches many of our lives. In fact, maybe even all our lives at some place along the way. And so that's one way that we can come together and show the world, hey, we're interested. We're interested in what's going on out there. We're interested in being part of the solution to the problems. And we can sit in the church and pray for the people who have cancer, but we get a chance to go out and actually do something about it. And so we're encouraging all of you, anybody, it doesn't matter your age or whatever, come out for a little while next Thursday and be a part of our team. And you can talk to Angie about all the details. She's organizing it. Flood her with questions after the service of how you can get involved up there in Tuscola and come out, raise some money, raise some awareness to be able to come together in unity and generosity to help deal with something. And I think if we had a lot of people from churches that are up there, people around that aren't a part of churches are going to go, wow, these Christian people are interested in this disease. They're interested in cures. And so it's a one way to be able to communicate to the world, hey, we're interested in you. We're interested in what God can do in our lives, both physically and spiritually as well. And so that's why we're promoting something like that. That's why we have a sign out front, because it's one way to get involved. Of course, we can't do everything, but as it's been said, do for one what you wish you could do for 100. If we can do it for one, then we've checked off a good day doing something for one. And so that's just one example of how we can bring unity and generosity into the real world. And maybe you can't get involved or whatever in that. Let's find something else to be involved in, to where we're letting unity and generosity pull us together. You may have a cause or an idea that's on your heart, and you think, I can't do this alone. Come talk to me. Come talk to some people in the church, and let's get together and let's do some of these things that gets us out there in the community and allows us to be a light to the world out there. There are so many things we can do, and hopefully we can jump on board and do more and more things that's going to show the world the love of God. And that's one thing we want to do. Unity means that we see ourselves as one. And it's interesting that in the New Testament, God uses the example of a human body as an example of unity, because our body works together in unity. Every part works together perfectly. We don't even have to think about making our body work right, except when we're getting out of bed in the morning, we have to kind of our brain has to tell our feet to get up and moving, right? But as we go through the day, our body works. It works together in unity. And when I see myself as part of you, when I see ourselves as extensions of one another, then it takes away that egocentric thing where it's about me and myself. It's about us. It's about we. And if I see myself as an extension of you, and you're an extension of me, like we're one body, just like my human body would be, as we see that amongst each other, then it's going to help us to be unified and to be generous with one another. If you're an extension of me, then I can take what's in my pocket and put it in your pocket, and it makes sense because we're one. If you're an extension of me, I can take the food on my table and share it with you, and it makes sense because we're one. If you're an extension of me, then I can take the shirt off my back and put it on yours, and it makes sense because we're one together. If you're an extension of me, then I can open up my home and let you come inside, and I can let you stay there if you need a place to stay, and it makes sense because you're an extension of me. I would do for you what I do for myself. That's what it means to have unity and generosity. What's mine is yours. What's yours is mine. Now, we don't go sell everything we have and build a commune. That's taking it to the extreme. But it's being able to say, I don't see myself as just me. I see myself as part of we. It's about us. And not just those that are in this building, it's with the other Christians that are out there and the buildings across the street and across town and across the state and around the world. We are one. And what's mine is theirs. What's theirs is mine. And we come together in unity in a very special way that makes sense when we see that. But it's sometimes very difficult for us to do that, because when it comes to making our lives, we tend to do the following thing. We like to make lines. We like boundaries. We like things to make sense because the world is a big place. And when it comes to taking care of myself, to be able to do that very well, then I put up boundaries around myself. And when I make boundaries around myself, then it makes it very difficult for me to have unity and generosity with other people. And so I build this little wall around myself, and I take care of me. And it feels good because I can handle this. It's hard for me to handle anything else outside of there, but I can handle this. And so I live in this little world where I'm taking care of me. Now, to let somebody else into my world, Elusha, can I have you come up here, please? I didn't plan this ahead of time. Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot. I'm going to invite you to come join my world. Can you come in here, please? Come in my world. Come on in.
I can't stand up.
You can't stand up. It's a little squishy there. But you're in my world, and I love him just like I love myself. We have unity, generosity. Here, whatever's in my pocket, I'll put in yours, which isn't much. But I'll do that with you. And this is great. Edie, come up and join my world, please. We got a good thing going here. There's lots of love and unity and generosity here, and you can come and join my world. And I'm sure there's a little bit of room in here if we kind of stretch a little bit and make it go a little further. And, well, your bottom's out of it, but that's okay. I'll take the rest of you. And this feels good, doesn't it? Yeah? You guys like this?
No.
Okay. Should we invite somebody else up here?
No.
You think there's room for Mom up here?
No.
No? Why not?
Squished.
It's too squishy. Okay, you guys can go back then. And let's get rid of this little world. Little worlds are not fun. They feel safe. They feel good. Actually, I really enjoyed it. I got some nice hugs from my kids there this morning. Okay? That was pretty nice. But when we build our world small, and you may say, well, my world's not that small, but we all tend to put limits around our worlds. And we're good people, and we're generous and kind, and we're united with whoever's in that little circle, but we sure don't like to make that circle very big, do we? We don't. It's very uncomfortable. It's very difficult for us to make that go. But we see a passage here in the early church that reminds us to break down our barriers and to make our world a little bit bigger. Let's look at Acts 4, verses 32 to 35. And we've been reading in unison, but in taking turns and stuff. But I'm just going to read this slowly because I don't want to just whiz through it. So just read along on the screen or on your bulletin as you listen as I read here. We read that all the believers were one in heart and mind. All the believers were one in heart and mind. No one claimed that any of their possessions was their own, but they shared everything. They shared everything they had. They shared everything they had. And with great power, the apostles continued to testify to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus. And God's grace was powerfully at work in them all. God's grace was powerfully at work in them all. That there were no needy persons among them. No needy persons. No. Zilch. No, none. For from time to time, those who owned land or houses, they sold them, brought the money from the sales, and put it at the apostles' feet. And it was distributed to anyone who had need. And I'll be honest, throughout my life and even now, I read that and I go, oh, isn't that so sweet? Isn't that just so nice how they helped each other? And it kind of gives you the warm fuzzies, and you're like, but that was just so nice of them to be able to do that for each other. But I'm focused on them. But what does that have to do with now? Because, well, that doesn't work now. I mean, all this stuff they talk about in this passage, well, I mean, there's something about God's grace is powerful, and I can get that. And, you know, we share a little bit when we need to, and when there's a need, we do that kind of thing. But to the extent that we have there, that sounds like something for a different time and place, but not for now. Is it meant for now? Does God expect us, if we want to be a growing church, reaching souls, this would be another characteristic to add to that list that we have? That we have unity and generosity? If I don't see you as an extension of me, then I'm not going to be very generous. Because I'm all about me in my own little world. But as soon as I see you as being a part of me, as soon as I see the believers in the church across the street as part of me, as soon as I see the ones across town and across the state and the country and the ones over in Africa and Asia and Europe, those believers are part of me, we are united together, then it makes sense to be generous wherever I have the opportunity. Now, I don't have enough in my pocket to share with everybody, but where there's a need. We read here that all of them were one in heart and mind. It wasn't just a group of the super Christians and the others just kind of let them do it. They were all, and I don't think they're exaggerating here. I don't think the Bible exaggerates. There was such a great thing going there that they were all in unity with one another. And we're talking about several thousand people, okay? We're not talking about just a little group of 12 disciples. We're talking about thousands of believers that were so united together in their cause of following Jesus that it made sense to them. That if there was a need over here, and I've got something over here that can meet that need, we bring that together, and we make it happen. And we're not talking about just spiritual needs, we're talking about physical needs. It all made sense, and it all came together as one. But we have this thing, a good old American value called independent. We like to be independent. That's a good thing, especially in our Western United States of America context of thinking. I'm independent. In other words, I don't rely on anybody else. I'm self-sustaining. I can take care of myself, which is a good thing because there's another value that we despise in America, and that's dependent. We don't want people being dependent because they might need somebody or somebody else. People should be able to handle it on their own. But being independent's in our blood. We think that we should be able to pull ourselves up and make things work for ourselves in every sphere of life. Not just with economics. Of course, yeah, I'm going to work for what I have and I'm going to own what I own and it's mine. But then, if I have a problem, well, let me fix it myself. Well, I'll pay somebody to do it. I'm not going to bother somebody else and say, I need help here. We don't like to ask people for help, do we? It's not part of our mindset to think about asking for help. And if somebody asks us for help, doesn't it sometimes cross our minds like, why are they asking me? Even though you're maybe willing to do it and you go out of your way to do it, but there's a little part of ourselves thinking, they should be able to figure that out on their own somehow. There's YouTube. Just watch the video. You can figure it out. You can pay somebody to do it. There's so many ways to handle it on your own. No matter what the problem is, and not even financial, it could be anything. We don't want to bother somebody else because everybody else has their own problems. I don't want to dump mine on anybody else. And when people start dumping theirs on me, then sometimes I go home and complain, can you believe this person just talked about their problems all day long? That's part of our American mentality of independent. We don't want dependent people to get into our little circles too much. I can tell you, this last year and a half, when our family has had some specific needs, I don't know how many times people have said to me, oh, well, this was going on, but I didn't want to bother you because you have your own problems. I've heard that many times. And people saying, I don't need you because I know you've got problems, you're dealing with other stuff. I don't want to bother you. I'm thinking, I want to be bothered. Bother me. If it's too much, I'll say so, or I'll find somebody else to help. But let's stop this mentality of thinking, I don't want to bother somebody else. I don't want to burden them. We need each other. The weak need the strong, but the strong need the weak. It works together. And we need to be able to come together in unity and see ourselves as extensions of one another so we can be generous, not just with our money, but our time and our hearts and our love and our stepping out of ourselves to serve one another. It's a beautiful thing when we come together to do that. And yes, we need to have personal responsibility. The Bible's full of examples about, like in Proverbs, we need to work hard like the ant. We don't need to be like the guy on the bed that just flops back and forth all day long like a hinge on a door. We don't need to be like that. We don't need to be, Jesus talked about, we need to be good stewards of what we have, and we need to work hard. We need to take that 1 talent and double it, and take those 5 and double it, and work hard and do the right things. We need to do those things. Dependent is a very controversial issue these days. How do we define what is dependent? Of course, there's children, and we're not expecting more out of them than what they need. There's the elderly, and we understand that there's specific needs that are there. There are those that are sick, and they have specific needs, and there's a certain area where dependent is okay, but there's so many areas where it's very blurry and very controversial these days. What about the veterans? What about the minorities? What about the unemployed? What about the underemployed? What about the immigrants, both legal, illegal? What about the healthcare system? Do we be dependent on a government, or do we handle it ourselves? These are the issues we're struggling with. The special interest group, the third world nations. I mean, where does the line go between independent and dependent, and how much do we cross those lines? It's very hard these days, because you know what? A lot of people who are dependent, they're using laziness, they're using entitlement as a way to be dependent. There is a big problem in our world that dependency is coming from the wrong sources. It's coming from a demand that, hey, I've got whatever excuse and I need somebody else to take care of me. And that's wrong. The Bible, God is all against laziness. He's against entitlement. He's against people who don't try to do something for themselves. Back in Leviticus, when God set up his nation of Israel and he gave them laws, he gave them a civil law that said, for those of you that are planting your fields, make sure that when you go to harvest time, that you leave the rows along the edges. Make sure that when you go over the field and you collect your stuff, don't pick up what you dropped, and don't go back over to see what you missed. Why? Because there's people out there that maybe can't. They don't have the land. They don't have the field. They don't have the job. And it gives them a chance to go and gather close to the edges, because maybe they're not strong enough. Maybe they're weak. Maybe they're elderly, but they can at least go out and do a little bit for themselves, or they can walk over the field and pick up the ones that were missed. And it gives them a sense of pride that they were able to do something. They were able to contribute. And it gives them a chance to do so. And in the civil law of Moses, that was set up. Not just so that the weak would have something, but so the strong would learn how to be generous and give. I mean, if I owned a field, okay, I'd want to go over it twice and make sure I got it all for myself. Because I'm thorough and I want to work hard and I understand what it is to be independent. But to learn to be generous and to let somebody else come alongside that doesn't have the field that I have and the harvest that I have to be able to gather, it was put in there. And so the dependents have to make sure that they're not being dependent because they're being lazy and selfish and entitled. And when Christ comes into a person who's dependent, that has those attitudes, he changes it. He changes it so they're no longer lazy and entitled and feeling like the world owes them something. We don't want to go that extreme. But the independents have a problem as well. The independents become proud. They become self-sufficient. They become selfish, what they've worked hard for. And so God wants to help the independents to be able to say, let go of that. Let go of that pride. Let go of that selfishness. And let me come in and teach you how to be generous. You've been blessed to be a blessing. Not to hoard for ourselves. Not to be able to say, look what I've achieved, look what I have, look what I've upped my neighbors in. And it keeps going on and on and on. And we live in a materialistic society that tells us we have to have, we have to have, we have to have. And every time we get something new, it's got to be bigger and better. But God is saying, why chase that? Why chase that white rabbit down the hole? Because it's going to lead you to a place that's not where God intends us to be. In our society, economics divide people, but when we walk into the church, whether we're dependent or independent, we lay those things down outside the door. We lay down our laziness and entitlement. We lay down our pride and our selfishness, and we come in here and we're all equal before God. We're all equal before one another. And when we go out the door, we don't pick those things up again and take them home with us. We leave them there. And that week, the trash guy comes and he takes them away because they're not to be a part of our lives. And we need to work on those things. Everybody can be a giver. Even the poor widow that Jesus saw went into the temple and she put her penny into the offering basket. That was all she had. And Jesus says she's given wonderfully because she's given from her heart. So no matter where we're at, we're all to be givers, but we can all be receivers. Even if we're at the other end and we have no needs, we do have needs. They may not come in financial needs, but they come in other ways, just like all of society has. And God says, come together, let's meet those needs of one another. Let's be together and have that unity and generosity. We need to be gracious receivers and gracious givers. We read in that passage that when God's grace came upon them, it helped them to be generous with one another. It's grace that teaches us how to do that. And we think that we know a lot about grace because we sing about amazing grace, but one of the things that amazing grace does is it teaches us to be generous. It teaches us that we didn't deserve anything from God, but anything we have spiritually, physically, and any level is a gift from Him, not because we deserved it, not because we worked hard and we grew up in America and we deserve it. Grace says we didn't deserve a thing, no matter where we were born, what family we're in, anything we have is a gift from God, and it doesn't belong to us, but it's given to us to be stewards of generosity to other people so we can show the unity of Christ, and so that more and more people will be attracted to that and say, I'm missing out on something. I want to learn to be a gracious giver and a gracious receiver, and I want to be a part of that. And our church is going to grow, and more people are going to know what the grace of Jesus Christ is about because they see it in ordinary people like you and me. And we don't know what grace is because we're not generous. Because we're not generous, it shows us we don't understand. And we sing about amazing grace, but it doesn't impact our lives enough. And I'm preaching to myself today because I've got a lot to learn as well. And all of us, we can be in this classroom together and we can be learning about God's amazing grace that teaches us to be unified and generous in new ways that we've never been able to before. The Apostle John said it this way: by this we know love, that Jesus laid down His life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and truth. Those are powerful words. If we're closing our hearts to the needs around us, then God's love is truly not in us. We need to search our hearts. And what does God's love mean to us? When we come to this table and we see the body and blood that was given to us by God Himself, He gave us the perfect example of what it is to lay down your life in unity and generosity and give all of yourself. What that's going to look like for each of us, I don't know, but we're working that way, that we could be like Christ in that. And let's move further down the line so that we can truly be repenting of our laziness and our sense of entitlement, but we could be repenting of our pride and self-sufficiency and learn to be a body, to learn to be extensions of one another. We get to practice it right here in this congregation. And in so many ways, I see that happening already, but let's up it a little bit and see what we can do to be the church like that we found in the book of Acts, to be a church that's continuing on the mission that God's given us to do.